Hi YouTube, this is Colin after a long hiatus. I'm back. This is the 5th installment of Robert Spencer's book entitled The Politically Incorrect Guide to Islam. And this chapter is called Islam Oppresses Women. And Spencer starts off this chapter with quoting many Muslim women in the modern era that are proud to be Muslim. They enjoy their faith. And it's a very interesting way in which he starts this chapter. But then he says, well, that's all well and good, except for the fact that there are these verses in the Quran and there are some hadiths that need to be talked about and, in his opinion, need to be forgotten or discarded by Muslims. He begins with chapter 4, verse 34, which is the famous verse. This is the verse that people who hate Islam and others, they use this verse all the time. And this verse is the list, literally, of if your wives are disobedient, what actions do you have to take? First it says to talk with them, then don't share your bed with them, and then hit them. And in all cases, every translation that I have, it says light slap. Use of all these translations says light spanking. And in the hadith that has to do with this verse, when someone came to the Prophet Muhammad and asked him, well, what should I, discipline my wife with, he gave him a toothbrush. So this verse does not say beat the holy hell out of your wife. This verse is a disciplinary tool, if you will. Not everyone has to agree with it. I don't agree with it. I think communication is a better way of handling your problems. But I know for a fact, from a theological perspective, that this does not constitute husbands beating the hell out of their wives. Why? Because in Islam, wives can get a divorce. So imagine if the husband is abusing his wife to such the extent that she wants to file for divorce, then why would God set up such a rule? This is a question that needs to be answered. Then he goes on to talk about, let's see here, another verse in the Quran that he says only has to do with men. It's a modesty verse, 24 verse 31, and he says that women have to be modest. The Quran says that they have to wear the hijab and things of that nature. But what's interesting is the verse right before it also says the same thing for men. They're almost identical. The only difference is that one says men, one says believing women, and one tells the man to wear modest dress and tells the women to wear to cover their bosoms. So what Spencer neglects to mention is that this chapter, these two verses, have to do with men and women, and it's not just telling to women to dress modestly, but also men as well. And many Muslim men do dress very modestly, and so there's that example. He then goes on to say, chapter 65 verse 4 has to do with child marriage. My translations don't specify children. They do say that to take caution, even if your women aren't menstruating. That doesn't mean that they're children. Granted that women before puberty don't menstruate, but that it's not saying child marriage. That's Spencer's interpretation, and he's welcome to that. But to say that that's the only interpretation is arrogant. To his credit, he does say that it was an Arab custom to be involved with child marriage. So I have to give him an historical credit for that. He doesn't just write that off. This is one of my favorite parts of the whole thing here. He gets into these hadith. Actually, I'll get to that in a second. I was going to go to the wife beating in the hadiths, but we'll in the collection Abu Dawud. But we'll get to that in a second here. One thing that's very interesting is he quotes a lot of issues with temporary husbands, and he seems to have this issue with a philosophy that Muhammad had, that if you get married to someone and then you want a divorce and you actually haven't had a relationship, that you should have a relationship with the person, and then you can get the divorce and then go back to your husband. or the person you want to remarry. And again, this is all Arab culture. The Quran actually does not specify this this advice of Muhammad, but Spencer has an issue with it, which is fine. That's his opinion. But I think Muhammad's point, and again, we have to ask the question of how reliable the hadiths are and things of that nature. You know, this is advice that Muhammad made on the spot, or there were situations that occurred where he had to make some sort of ruling. And the Quran does not mention this rule, so we have to take into consideration this might have to do with a certain situation, a certain time, because this whole issue of getting remarried to someone and then actually having to have intercourse or an actual relationship with your current husband before you can divorce and remarry somebody else is really only found with a couple people. These same hadiths that have this situation, they're always the same people. They're always the same woman and the same man. So we have to take into consideration that this hadith was not a universal advice. This was advice given to one woman, for as far as we know, could have just jumped right into this marriage, and she was previously married to this other man, and she decided that, oh, well, you know, I don't want to be married to you anymore. I want to go marry this other guy. Muhammad said, well, wait a minute, you haven't even had a relationship. You don't even know what this other man is like. Why don't you stick around for a little bit before you make such quick decisions? That's how I interpret that. I mean, if Spencer wants to look at it as Muhammad was just saying you have to have sex first and then divorce, well, that's fine. That's your interpretation of it. But I see it as a little bit more, you know, a little bit more concrete and not so abstract. And then he goes on to the issue of polygamy. This is another thing that really cracks me up when people blame Muhammad for polygamy, especially Christians and Jews. I'll never understand that, considering the fact that Spencer says that Muhammad married out of lust. Well, if that's true, then why were almost all, in fact, I'll need a Muslim to verify this for me, weren't all of Muhammad's marriages either for political or allegiant ties? I know Aisha was. And I know a lot of his other wives were married to people who were leaders of tribes and other nations, and Christians and Jews. So if he married out of lust, why did he marry widows of people who were killed in battle and things of that nature? Not a very lustful person. Plus, polygamy is in the Judeo-Christian tradition as well. Look at Solomon. Almost all. Look at Abraham. You know, Hagar and Sarah. So polygamy is not just to Muhammad. And I love it when people seem to forget that. It's kind of hypocritical. The only person who never got married, there's two people in the Bible, John the Baptist and Jesus Christ. Everyone else, as far as I know, maybe some of the prophets, Daniel maybe didn't get married, but there's a lot of polygamy and a lot of incest in the Bible. He also talks about female circumcision. This is another one that kind of is interesting. He says that female circumcision is a part of Islam. No, it's not. There's nowhere in Islamic theology that female circumcision is talked about. This is a cultural matter. Anyway, I'm going to end this video here, and I'm going to continue with the separate issue of wife beating in the Hadiths, because there's a great example of Spencer cherry-picking sources once again. So, hope you enjoyed this video. I'm glad to be back on YouTube. I hope you're all doing fine. Shalom to all of my Jewish subscribers, because I know Yom Kippur, I believe, just happened. And salam to all my Muslim subscribers, because I know Ramadan is going on as we speak. So have a great fast. And to all my Christian friends, of course, peace be with you all. And to everyone, I'm back, and I hope you all are having a good life. Peace.